To Salford City Radio 94.4 FM, to the Friday Sports Show with Jimmy Petruzzi. And tonight we have a fantastic show lined up. We've got a really fascinating guest this evening from far afield, as far as the field as you could probably go, really. But it's really interesting insight because the coach we're interviewing tonight recently was in the area, travelling around Europe with an academy, and they're a leading coach. They're going to give us some perspectives on the local area. We bring you all the latest and all the news from around the globe, and we also bring you the local news. We focus on the local news, and this evening we're going to have an international flavour. What a fascinating show we've got lined up for you this evening. Really, really fascinating show. It's a fantastic show, an insight into one of the top coaches. He's going to give us insight of what it's like to be a top-class coach, and also gives us perspectives on the local sport, their perspective on sport in the area, and their perspective on how to be the best you can be as an athlete as well. Really, really fascinating guest. So do make sure you tune in and listen into tonight's show. It's a really, really fascinating show we've got for you. So we've got our guest here, Tony Basha, our guest. Good to have you on the show, buddy.
Good to hear from you, Jimmy. How you going, bud?
Yeah, no, fantastic. So we were just saying that we like to bring, guests from the area and also guests from far afield. So I was sort of mentioning your experience as a coach and sort of, what it's like to be a coach and to travel in different areas. And, recently I mentioned that you were in the area and you brought a touring team over here and you have done so on a few different occasions. So we'll get an insight into your thoughts in terms of, player development and also a perspective on different levels of football around the world and over here as well. So thanks for being on the show, Tony. It's great to have you on board the show. So sort of just to introduce yourself and to give people a bit of an insight into your background. So with yourself, we'll sort of look at your own career. So your career, from a club perspective, you took the team Rival Me to a number of promotions, and you've left them now. But tell us about your experience with Rival Me. What was it like being there? What was it like to sort of take them through the ranks in the leagues?
Mate, it was it wasn't an easy job, to be fair. It was only just like a local football team. But we won a couple of competitions. We probably won 2 comps in the local league. It was like a Sunday league. Then we started to build a name for ourselves, and we ended up getting into the state league. We had to buy a franchise to get into the state league. Which the first year I pretty much kept the same team that played the Sunday league, and I took them to a grand final that year in the state league, which is high level. Obviously, it's probably like a conference league in England. So I took them to the grand final. We missed promotion by 1 point. Then we obviously started. We understood it and understood the way the game was played, and we got promoted 2 times in 3 years, basically. And it took a lot of hard work. And actually, we had help from an Englishman of the name of Kingsley Williams. I think you had him on the show.
Yeah, no, we did.
Not long ago.
Yeah, no, we did have Kingsley on the show, and yeah, definitely a very talented footballer, and he spoke very highly of you as a coach, Tony. He spoke very highly of the club, and what an amazing meteoric rise. In one sense, it almost sort of compares to a point. I mean, you've got like the local team here, Salford, and they have had investment by ex-Man United players, as you're probably aware of, and they've sort of a bit of meteoric rise, albeit at the moment they've hit a bit of a plateau, and they've seen how difficult it is, even with money, to do and sort of to go up the leagues. But certainly Kingsley spoke really highly of your time there. And you've gone to Parramatta FC now, which are an iconic club to a point, because obviously a lot of tradition and history, and you're working there as a head of football. What's your role entail there, Tony?
Yeah. Look, I'm actually excited about being at Parramatta, because it's a great club and it's a great history, and obviously it's probably one of the best clubs in Sydney, to be fair, in regards to the name. It's Manchester United of Sydney, basically, and my job is I was head of football, so I basically run everything from A to Z. But I'm very happy there. To be fair, it's good to have a change. I was at Ryman for a long time, and a change is always good, as you know. It makes it freshens you up a bit, and we've got a beautiful stadium and got a really good coaching staff around me, and we've got good board members, who support what I do. So I'm very happy there, mate. To be fair.
Yeah, it must have been emotional to leave Rivalry after taking them from sort of through the ranks. Really, I mean, what you achieved there was phenomenal, and like you mentioned before, to sort of describe it and put it into context, it's sort of moving through the ranks, and you established Rydalme as a top club in Sydney. They're a respectable team in terms of, they've done really well. They've had, good cup runs, and in the league they're obviously a strong team. And did you feel, how did you feel having, I mean, obviously, you've moved on now and to different things, and you're pushing on, but did it feel like emotional leave after all those years and having taken them to successive promotions and grand final wins?
Yeah, it was emotional to leave the club. It was, it's not easy to be there for so long, but things changed in the club. You know what I mean? People changed. Which I didn't like. So it was people trying to do things that didn't look like. Basically, I had off from Parramatta, and I went home. Basically, Parramatta's my home because I played there as a junior for a long time. So Ryman, I had a good time, but sometimes when stuff you don't like what's going on, you just have to go where you're happy. And
no, absolutely. Absolutely, Tony, and we wish you all the best. Certainly at Parramatta, it's a big job, and the club's an iconic club, and it's produced a lot of good players over the years. And with your guidance, hopefully, you can sort of get back to where it belongs. And obviously, a lot of good people at the club will be working there as well. And we sort of focus now on the academy and the Australasian Academy, and that's quite fascinating. I think that the academy itself has had a meteoric rise in one sense too. It's sort of you developed it from the ground basically to where it is today, and it's a respected academy around the world, and obviously you visited a number of different professional teams, and recently you were in the area not far from here, and you've been here a few times too. So it's interesting to see the perspective, and from the perspective of the outside, what would you say? I mean, you've had you've sort of travelled around Europe, and you've been to Spain, Italy, and different countries as well. But from the point of view of the players, what were their sort of perspective in terms of different playing styles around the Europe? What was their take? What was the difference between, say, playing against the English teams and the Spanish teams? And what were your thoughts on playing against some of the top English teams? I mean, I know you guys played against the City, and yeah.
Yeah, in Australia, we got good players. We got some good players, but unfortunately, the coaching isn't the best. The coaches aren't great. That's out of respect to the coaches that try hard, but unfortunately, we don't have many good coaches here. You do have the odd good ones, but there's not many. Like obviously, when you go to Europe, you got 400 UEFA pro coaches just hanging around, jobless. We're in Australia, we've probably got 5 UEFA pro coaches in the whole of the country, you know what I mean? So obviously the coaching's better, the facilities are better, they got better competitions. It's run basically all year round football. Where in Australia we only play for maybe 5-6 months, then we're off. So the development's just not there. England, mate, obviously I've got a good working relationship with Manchester City, with the boys over there. They're doing great things. I think the English players are in good stead for the future, to be fair. I think what they're doing at City is unbelievable. I really like their coaches. I love the whole vibe of the club. It's a great club. And doing the right thing, and there's a lot of good young kids coming through that club. But when you go to Spain and Italy and whatnot, but for me, I thought Spain was just a different level. The class of the players and their movement and their football knowledge and for such young kids is amazing. You know, it's really good players.
Yeah, that's really interesting you say.
I don't know, mate.
That's interesting you say from your perspective. Obviously, you know, you're a coach and you've been coaching for a long time now, and I think that, you know, you're certainly one of the top up-and-coming coaches coming through, you know, young and dynamic and look at things pragmatically. And I think for me, it's interesting you say, and I've often thought myself that technically I echo your sentiments. I think in Spain they seem to be they give themselves more time on the ball, Tony. They manage to have more time, and it's evident when you see some of the players coming over here, for sure. And I'm sort of, I can never really get my head around. I'm sure it's a combination of factors, but just, I mean, Spain did have a point where they revolutionised the game there. I mean, I think they got fed up of being the nearly man and sort of decided to train a lot of coaches and put a good system in place. And you know, you look at the players technically, their first touch, and some of the players playing in the Premier League, and it's one of them. And I mean, you've seen firsthand, you've seen some of the biggest clubs in Europe firsthand what they do coaching wise. Do you think, is it anything to do with coaching? Is it anything to do with, you know, volume of training? Why is it Spain are producing these players year in, year out, but we sort of see some of the other European countries, and not having a go at England, I think some great players coming through here at the moment too. But technically, you've got to say that Spain at the moment are that little bit better. And what's your take, Tony? Why do you think that is the likes of Spain are producing these players who are really comfortable on the ball, happy to be on the ball, they want the ball, they show for the ball, you know?
Mate, you know what it is? Look, I think Australia and England are pretty much the same type of lifestyle. I think the kids, they got everything, basically. Oh, cut out. I lost him.
Yeah, sorry, can you hear me, Tony? Yeah, no. Can you hear me, buddy? So we'll try and get Tony back on the line there. He was making a really good point about the different way that Spain play the game and development. So we're going to get Tony back on board, who was making a really, really fascinating point there about the Spanish league and obviously how it compares to, because you've got to wonder sometimes, you watch the World Cup and you've got to say to yourself, well, why is it that Spain seem to be much more comfortable in the ball, more possession, and so on and so forth. So it's interesting to get the take from a professional coach to see what he's got to say about things, and that's for sure. And I think Tony there was alluding to the lifestyle factor being one thing, and I certainly agree. Certainly to a point, I think that you know the footballing side of things. And Tony, we're just saying, are you back online?
Yeah, I'm back, mate.
Yeah, and I was just echoing your sentiments. I think you're making a great point. I think that from a lifestyle point of view, you know, Australia, England, I think that, you know, both countries share similar values and go about doing things in the same way. You know, not to say Spain's a million miles away from a values point of view, but I think that sort of hunger's there, that little bit more of a hunger. In my experience, and I don't know if you sort of share the same sentiments, I sort of found that on the continent, players sort of tend to focus more on the technical side, away from the game as well, away from training too. Did you find that some of the Spanish players sort of practice more technically? Because if you practice, you're going to get better. If you don't practice and just rely on the club, you're not going to get very far. Do you think that's the case as well?
Yeah, look, 100%. 100%. But for me, the biggest thing is like I said to you, with the Australian players and the English players, mate, they don't need to play football. Their parents can look after them. The government looks after them. When you look at Spain, these guys, all they have is football. They breathe football, live football. You know what I mean? And they've always got the ball at their feet. Where with our kind of people, obviously in regards to, like I say, going back to the English and the Australian, because we are the same people. And we do the same things. You know, in Spain, obviously, mate, the pay for the parents and it isn't great. You know what I mean? So obviously it's a religion. Football's a religion for them over there. You go there, everyone's playing football everywhere. You know what I mean? Obviously, England and Australia's got other sports that they play. You know,
that's a good point.
It's football.
That's a good point.
You know
yeah,
what I mean? So,
that's a great point.
And they love it.
I think so too, and I think that I mean, they got a much higher youth unemployment there, that's for sure. And I think that on top of that, like you said, the economic situation there as well. And I think that for sure that sort of contributes to that. And I think you're right in the sense that for them, football is is from the point of view that you're right. It's you've got rugby union here, you've got rugby league, you've got many other sports as well, Olympic sports too, that take some priority as well. Football's big as well. I mean, I for me as well, I think, Tony, as well, it's sort of one big thing I sort of think is starting to change now is the volume of training. And there's regulations over here about how often you can train, I believe, as a young player. They don't have the same sort of regulations in some countries in the continent. And I think that it all adds up. If you're training 3 or 4 hours more every week, 5 hours more a week than another player, you're going to get better. That's for sure. You're going to improve. And that's a big, big problem for me. I think that huge. And I think it's hard to get the balance, because where do you get the balance between education and, there's only so many players can make as a footballer. And obviously, what do you do if you don't make it? So you've got to get the balance. But, I'm a big believer that if you're in it to win it, go for it. So it's hard to get the balance, but I think there are certain regulations in coaching that certainly make it more challenging to do that. But what are your thoughts on, say, players that rely purely on academies to make it, Tony? Do you think players have got to train elsewhere as well, or can they just rely on playing at the academy? What are your thoughts? And I think players have got to train away from the academy, if possible, to improve their weaknesses. Do you think that that's the case? Or
do you mean in England, like when they're at the academy?
Yeah, I think in England, I think that the thing is that sometimes players, from my experience of working in academies over here, or Centre of Excellences anyway, it's like they come along to the Centre of Excellence, and away from there you see them individual plans, and it's sort of hit and miss. What I used to say, Tony, when I used to work in Centre of Excellence, is I preferred my players not to play school football. I thought football at school was a waste of time for them. The level was too low, and players knew they played for a professional club. They're going to sort of out there to prove a point. They're only going to get injured. So I used to say, focus away from the club on training on your own. Improve your left foot, your right foot. Get in the gym if you can. Do swimming, other stuff too. Because you can't just rely on 2-3 nights a week and a game if you're going to make as a pro. I'm conscious of burnout, but I do believe they've got to get a session or two in away. Do you think that's the case? They need to get extra session or two to raise their game, or?
Yeah, look, at the end of the day, man, like going back when we were growing up, we used to train every day. We went to the park every day for 3-4 hours every day. This burnout thing that I hear, it pisses me off.
Yeah.
Because if someone loves something and loves the game, you just can't get sick of it. If you want to make it and you want to be a footballer, then there's no such thing as burnout. I believe it's an excuse for players and parents, and they use that excuse. I think for me it's crap. If someone loves something, they're going to do it, regardless of the matter, what's going on. There's plenty of time for homework. They come home from school, do the homework, go down the park and train every day. If they want to make it, I'm pretty sure you know the story of Harry Kuehl and
absolutely.
Those guys. They were at Smithfield Park every day.
Absolutely, yeah.
For hours on end, training day. And look where he got him. You know what I mean? There's a lot of players that fall through the cracks. All this, when it gets over 30 degrees, he can't train. When it rains, they close the fields. It's just a load of crap.
Yeah, no, I think in the day, some of the protection laws were brought in for good reason, but on the other side of things as well, the issue is that it's sort of gone the other way now too. And if you want to make it as a sports person, no matter what sport you play, you've got to put the effort in, you've got to put the work in. And like you says, I think that's quite interesting, really. You made an interesting point there, sort of focusing on Australian football a little bit now, for people who are wondering what Australian football's like. I think for me, in my opinion, it's sort of gone backwards, Tony. I really do. I think you mentioned Kuehl there. There was an opportunity, I think, in the 2006 World Cup to sort of put an infrastructure in place to sort of keep producing players. There were some good players. There was Kuehl, Viduka, Bresciano, some really, really good players, But I think after that, it didn't really kick on. And I can't put my finger on why it didn't kick on. I can't get my head around. I think for me, it's almost sort of taken 3 steps forward and 5 back. And what are your thoughts? Obviously, you're on the beat there. You know what goes on. Why didn't go forward? I mean, I thought 210, 214 was a good chance to get the house in order and put a good challenge, for not to say to win the World Cup, but sort of try and go further than getting out of the group. But what happened there? What was one of the main things?
Well, you know me, mate. I don't never hold back. I say the truth, and I say it out loud. I'm not scared to hide the truth, you know what I mean? For me, Australian football has gone backwards. The A-League, you know, it's, as much as people think it's great, it's not as good as the NSL, back in the national league. It's better advertising and whatnot, and obviously players get paid more money. But the NSL obviously produced more players. But look, like I said to you before, it's Australian football has got so much talent floating around, but unfortunately the amount of money players have to pay here, for the English people don't understand, is if a player is playing the high level, say you've got a 15-year-old who's playing NPL, that kid has to pay $2,500 a year. And unfortunately, there's players out there that they can't afford it, so they don't play at the highest level. So a lot of players go playing local football, and they just, you know, they give up. Mm-hmm. And that's a big problem that we have. Also, like I said, the coaches, and there's players playing NPL that are really good players, first team players. But they're probably better than some A-League players that play in the top flight. But the problem is, the top flight becomes a recycling bin. A player gets sacked from one club, he goes to another club. Mm. It's just players don't have an opportunity, and we don't have enough teams. Like in Sydney, there's over 400,000 people playing, and there's two teams, and two teams, obviously each team's got 5 foreigners, so they've only got a couple of positions open for the local players. So that's a 0.03% chance of making it into the top league here, which is a pretty bad statistic. You know what I mean? So we do have issues, and it's beyond football, and people running. There's some people running the game that aren't football people, man. So
yeah, no, it's interesting
big
stuff.
Problem.
That's interesting stuff, and I think for me, sort of like, you know, it goes back to some of the old excuses that people make, and I think that's a big problem. You know, some of the people running the game make excuses, and the bottom line is not being run properly and not being run as good as it can be run. And I think that's an important thing in terms of creating a pyramid to get to the very top. Interesting you mentioned the A-League there. I was speaking to someone a few weeks ago about a player from the UK, from Bolton actually, was at Bolton last protocol, who's gone to the Wanderers, Adam Lafondra. Any thoughts? Have you seen him at all play? I was speaking to someone actually the other night, and they told me that he's sort of broken a record for fastest number of goals, I think, in terms of getting to 10 goals. I stand corrected there, but do you know anything about Lafondra, how he's getting on, Tony, at the Wanderers? I've sort of only got caught wind of it a few weeks ago.
He's playing Sydney FC, that guy.
Oh, sorry, he's Sydney FC, okay, yeah. Can you tell us a bit about how he's getting on there, or...?
He's doing okay, because I don't really, like I said to you, I only watch my boys when they're playing the A-League. Yeah. I know he's scoring goals. He scored a couple of penalties, though. He scored a few penalties.
Yeah.
But he's doing okay, I suppose, you know. Even Del Piero at 40 came over and he looked like bloody Maradona.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So,
It's the league isn't the best.
Yeah.
I hate having to say, but I'm a very honest person, and I'm a believer of having football people in football positions.
That's a great point. You know what I mean? That's a great point for sure.
That's my way of things. If you're a football person, you work in football. If you're not a football person, don't work in the game. Unfortunately, we've got a number of people working in the game that aren't football people, and that's the state of the game where we're at. And obviously, again, the kids have changed, mate. The kids, they're not the same. Like, obviously, going back NSL days, the kids we didn't have computers, we didn't have laptops, we didn't have that game Fortnite that everyone plays on, FIFA. You know, we were in the park playing. That's when the NSL was around. Now the kids, they don't spend time in the park like before, you know. Maybe that's why we're falling behind and we're not producing any players. But I don't think we've got any players playing in the EPL, maybe one, which is Aaron Moy. He's the only one playing in the EPL.
That's right, yeah. And
then we had 10.
That's right, and the ladder
playing, you know.
Yeah, they keep at Brighton too.
We're not producing players.
Yeah. No, that's
obviously, maybe, you know.
But the thing is, Tony, I mean, I've seen your lads play, you know, lads at the Australasian Soccer Academy, and when you first brought them over to the UK a number of years ago, I've seen them since then on several occasions, and I was really surprised. I mean, I'd seen them in Australia and I'd seen them train, and I knew that there were some good players, but I must admit, when I first saw him, one of the first tours you did, and you played against some of the youth teams at Barrie and City and other teams, I thought, wow, these guys are good, man. These guys are good players. It really exceeded. I mean, I knew they had some talent there, and I'd seen other Australian teams come over in the past, and they've had one or two decent players. But I thought that your lads were really, really competitive and really, really made a name for themselves. And I mean, what are you guys doing different? I mean, why is that the case? I mean, I must admit, even coaches in the UK had sort of commented, and I think it took a few people aback. And I remember speaking to a coach, a good friend of mine, and I think you went and did some training with them. And I phoned him up later. I said, "What do you think of the lads?" And I thought he'd say the usual thing, they were decent, good. But he goes, the glowing report he gave your lads was phenomenal. And I thought, well, I knew these guys could compete and do really, really well, but I think it sort of exceeded even the expectations in terms of, to come over here and play against some of the elite. And these are the elite over here, not just from the UK. Some of these teams are bringing players in from Spain, from France, from Italy, from Africa, from around the world. And what do you guys do different to everybody else, Tony, to be at that level? Because we'll talk about players you've brought through soon, and we're going to sort of touch on the academy in more detail. But, on that tour itself, it must have been a big eye-opener for you. And what did you do to prepare to get the lads at that level?
Well, look, I remember that group that came over. 3 of those players now playing in the A-League. 2 of them played for the Young Socceroos. Some of the players went on to be, really, really, really good players, play at the top level. Look, man, at the end of the day, the coaching staff we have at the academy is, I've got coaches from abroad. I've just signed a coach from Tottenham, who was at Tottenham Academy for 5 years. And I've got 2 coaches from Spain, from Valencia, who both hold UEFA Pro coaching licenses. So obviously we've got the best coaches in Australia. And look, at the end of the day, it's all about believing in your players. A lot of, yourself, a player doesn't become bad overnight. A player does not become bad in one game or one season. It's about the way you make them feel. As a coach, you got to make them feel good. You got to work with them. You got to work on their weaknesses, strengths. You got to give them information, and you got to make them feel good about themselves. Because if you can make someone feel good, and yourself mentally, if a player is good mentally, he's going to be good for you.
Absolutely.
It's making them believe in themselves. If you can get someone who's been let down. I've had a lot of players with their coaches have killed them. The coaches that just kill the players, vibe. He turns them off the game. There's players like that, I'll try and get them, and obviously I've done a lot of work with yourself. You've taught me a lot in regards to mental preparation and talking to players and how to talk to players. Obviously I've used NLP. I use NLP, and that's the key. I'm telling you, it's a big key for what I do. Yeah, how I do things.
That's interesting stuff. And anyone sort of listening who doesn't know what NLP is, it's neuro-linguistic programming. It's a fascinating concept, and I think also it's about using psychological strategies and getting in the players' heads, and not just about having a positive mindset. NLP, in a nutshell, is about modelling excellence, finding what works, eliciting strategies that can help people to move forward. And I may actually cover it on a show, because it's one of the modalities I use in performance training and coaching in athletes and businesses, alongside other modalities too. But it's a great point you made there, because mindset is huge. And I think the one thing that sort of struck me about your players, Tony, on that first tour, the mindset. They weren't overawed at all. They went to teams like City and they had no, I mean, obviously you're going to have a few nerves, but there was no fear in one sense. And I remember watching them at they play some of the younger teams at Barrie, and they had no fear, these lads. They were passing the ball around and enjoying themselves and playing with a smile on their face, and there was no fear. And I think it was a testament to the academy and the coaches and yourself to sort of encourage them to play. And it's a great point you make there, because a lot of coaches stifle talent. It's like a player wants to beat a player, and take players on and get out there and express yourself, and that sort of stuff is really important. Be prepared to make mistakes as well. And what was their take on it, Tony, at the time? What were their thoughts? I mean, for them, some of them players, it's the first time they'd been abroad and played against some of these players. What feedback did you get from them? What were their thoughts in terms of...
They loved it. They obviously in Australia might watch the EPL, so when the guys get to come over and be in the country where football, is the game, the boys loved it, and they look forward to it, and they enjoyed it. But going back to the way you're saying the boys played, man, when I coach, I let them express themselves. Some coaches don't understand that. Like, if a player's a good dribbler, you let him dribble, you know what I mean? So for me, if someone wants to dribble, I let him dribble. I don't ever put pressure on him and tell him not to dribble. Where unfortunately people watch the EPL and the La Liga, and they try and model their training around it, but they don't understand that their players aren't up to that level, and they don't let players. Obviously, like you said, they stifle the players' skill levels, and they can kill a player. If a player knows how to dribble, you let him dribble. If a player knows how to pass, you let him pass. You know what I mean? You got to work with their strengths, not their weaknesses. So, unfortunately, where the game of football, where a coach can demoralise the player and then finish his career off if he gets the wrong coach. So it's important that they have a good coach.
Yeah, no, that's interesting stuff. And I believe now, Tony, you've sort of gone full-time as well. You've got a full-time opportunity. I sort of noticed on social media the other day that you got like a full-time academy thing as well. Is that the case, or how does that work itself? If you sort of give us a bit of light in terms of how that's going to work, the full-time thing that you're doing.
Yes, so I got sick of rained out sessions in Australia. Even sometimes if a dog pisses on the field, they close the field. Yeah. So I got sick of it. So I rented a warehouse, turned into a big football facility. We've got a field, which is about 26 metres by 16. We've got a classroom that sits 40 players, tactical room. We've got a FIFA room for the boys to hang out. We've got a sauna, spa. We've got a massive gym for the players. So I've decided to go full time. We train every day. But in with the football, we've also they get a course through the TAFE of New South Wales. So they get a fitness coaching course, which obviously takes you in a college. It's like we've got a college at our centre now. So they have a plan B, because a lot of players would want to be professional, but unfortunately, how hard it is to make
Absolutely,
it. That is something to fall back on. So obviously they can become a gym instructor, trainer, speed and conditioning coach. That's what they get a certificate in, which helps them in their careers after football, or they can go to university. It helps them with university. So it's obviously they study and train every day with our Spanish coaches. At the new $1 million facility that we built.
Yeah, that's really interesting stuff. And I mean, recently I've been doing some sort of cover work with some scholars, football scholars as well, and it's more than likely I'm going to be working with them until the end of the season. And the idea is obviously, I guess similar to what you mentioned there, that they go through the college to get the qualification as well. And I always encourage them. I always say to the players, the young players, you know what, you know, irrespective of whether you make it or not, do your education, educate yourselves, study, learn. It's really important. Sometimes the players, they kind of think, well, they've hedged all their bets in terms of being a professional player, and there's not only is there only so many spots to be a pro player, also for your own personal development. I think it's really important to learn. And I had this conversation about a week ago with him. I sort of sat them down. It wasn't part of the curriculum. I sat them down and said, look, lads, it's important you keep learning. It's important whether you read books, you do courses, you finish this course, and obviously some of the players could end up being released as well, and then the motivation to finish the course might not be there. I said, even if you get released, do the course, because you never know when you might need it. You could go to university, you could go play at a college in America. There's many options out there, but also education's key. And do you think it's really important that players educate themselves, Tony, that they learn things, that I'm not just saying just academic education, but just generally learn as well, rather than just focus on one thing? Do you think it's really important that they learn and sit down and learn? It's a key thing,
100%, because even after football. Like, what are they going to do?
Yeah, great point.
They really need to, after football, what happens? That, unless they're playing in England, but in England they're making millions of dollars. If you don't, then you need something to fall back on. So that's why I've done this course to teach them that you need to have a plan B in life. If you don't have a plan B, then I don't know what you're going to do after football, because you never know. Injuries happen, and some players don't last long in the game. They get released, as you know. Then
Absolutely.
They obviously can't get a club.
Absolutely.
So it's important that they do study. If they don't study, it's going to be a big problem for them in the future.
Absolutely.
So it's important.
No, absolutely. No,
Super important.
Any young players listening to the show, or parents listening to the show, there you go. You have it from a professional coach who's encouraging players to learn, and as a parent, encourage the kids to learn and keep educating themselves, and it's a really, really big thing. And young players listening in, there you have it as well, as a professional coach who's travelled the world, who's seen all there is to see in football, pretty much telling you like it is, and it's really important stuff. And what about some of the players we mentioned that have come through your academy? You okay to sort of mention some of the players who've come through the academy and what they're doing now as well, and how they're getting on?
Yeah, well, we had obviously the youngest A-League player who ever debuted, and still is the youngest player to debut in the top flight here in Australia, is Australasian Soccer. You met him. He was
Absolutely.
Man City.
Absolutely, what a player!
Great little player. We got Mitchell Duke, who spent 5 years in Japan in the J League. He played for the national team, the Socceroos. Obviously, he played in Japan for 5 years, which is the strongest league in Asia, in Japan. Kobina Apiakupi, another player who played for the Wanderers, won Asian Champions League, and went on to play. Well, this year he just finished off in Korea, playing in Incheon United, which is the K League. That's the second strongest league in Asia. Obviously, a lot stronger than the A League. So, look, there's a number of other players that I haven't named that are playing in other countries, but they're the three that stand out who have come through the academy.
Yeah.
These guys were just normal kids who one lived in Parramatta, one lived in Liverpool, in Sydney. Normal kids and who worked hard and got what they deserved. There was better players that didn't make it because obviously they didn't listen and work hard enough. And these two were. Well, these three were the smarter ones, basically. But you should know those two. You met them before.
Absolutely.
When they were younger.
Absolutely, and great lads too. And the one thing that struck me about them lads too, so down-to-earth lads, and I think one of the good things about them as well, and I think certain players sometimes, Tony, they get to the very top and it gets to their head. I think one of the things that you do really well, and the academy does well, it keeps people in check. I mean, the players stay humble. Even when they're playing, like you says, in Japan, it's a big league. Japan, it's been a professional league for a long time, and even they're playing in the top leagues or wherever they're playing. One thing that strikes me about your players is that it's sort of respectful culture. They are humble. They don't sort of walk around thinking that they are, the bee's knees, so to speak. Is that something you install in your players, Tony, to stay humble and to be grounded? And because I've noticed that some of your players are, really humble and grounded and not thinking that they're big time,
100%. Well, you hit the nail on the head. I've got a saying: you come as a boy, you leave as a man.
Yeah.
So that's something that we do at the academy. I do teach the boys about respect. I teach them about giving time to the fans. I teach them about staying humble, and then they're crowd favourites. Like when you see them playing after a game, they're the ones that always go to the fans and get photos and do autographs with them. Like I can tell you a story. Mitch Duke just came back and signed a short-term deal with the West Sydney Wanderers here in Sydney. They lost the game. His whole team went in the room. He was the only one out there talking to the fans.
Wow.
2 weeks ago. So that's the type of things that we teach them, because at the end of the day, not only you have to be a good footballer, you have to be a good person. And then when you finish football, you're going to be a person, you know what I mean? So you got to be a good person
Yeah.
So that's what we teach them. Definitely is important. Attitude's the most important thing, and respect, and always giving time to the people and the fans, and that's very important.
No, that's interesting saying. And I think that for me, like the academy, it's almost like a family in one sense, an extended family, because I think that there are many parallels between, like you say, the southwest of Sydney and the area here, the Salford area here. It's a very working class area, the salt of the earth people who work really hard, and hard-working people, good honest people, And I think for me, one of the things that the academy brings is this sort of communal feel. I think that sense of community, Tony, in my experience, in a lot of cities is going, and certainly in the Sydney area, I think that in some of the more affluent areas and urban areas, the sense of community is going, and even, not just over there, all over the place, all over the world in big cities is going. But I think what you guys have preserved really, really well is that sense of community. You go out there and you see people outside training hours, and you say hello to them, you sit down, you have a coffee, and that's a big thing, I think, for me, for any community, to have that sort of bond, looking out for each other is key. And do you find it is like an extended family, the academy, for people? They become friends, lifelong friends, and that sort of stuff?
Oh, 100%. That's exactly what the academy is about. We're built on family, trust, unity, where everyone works together. There's no backstabbing, because in football, you know what it's like, mate. There's a lot of people, you can't trust many people in the game. There's a lot of backstabbers, a lot of people that pretend to be your mate, and they call you, legend, and they're really, you can't trust them. In football, you can't really trust many people. Exactly. But in the academy, we're a close-knit group, all the parents, or the kids, or the players, or the coaching staff, we're a close-knit group. That's how I like to do things. Even now in my Parramatta, I love the close-knit families, and it's very important that we have that, because at the end of the day, we train together a lot. We're always hanging out together, so it's important that we're always close, and then we know, talk behind each other's back, and we work together as a family. And we obviously work with a lot of kids who obviously come from refugee backgrounds in the area from where we're located, and we teach them Australian values, and we teach them respect and the family, and the way the family should be. And I had to kick out a player who was really good because his dad wouldn't fit in. He was a top player, but his dad would not fit in what we're about, and I had to let him go. And he goes, why are you letting me go? I said, mate, because you don't get along with the other parents. There's no room for you here.
Yes.
So that's how it is. It's definitely family.
Yeah.
It's a family club. It's a family academy. It's all about love and caring for each other. That's how we do it. And
you guys have expanded to, you're doing some stuff in Sierra Leone, I believe, as well. Is it Sierra Leone that you're doing?
Yeah, we've opened the academy in Africa, West Africa.
Wow.
Sierra Leone. Yeah. We've got about 50 kids there.
That's amazing.
Again, we fund it. Yeah, it is. They send me some videos, and you feel sorry for them. But there's some really talented players. So I'm looking forward to going there this year some stage and visit the kids.
Yeah.
We're doing a lot of charity for them here too. So at the centre we've got a big bin for boots. So all the kids here in Australia, was boots that they don't need or they don't wear, and they donate them. So we've got a full box of boots now we've got to send to them. So look, we're like I said, we're trying to expand and give other people a chance in life and then play football without a problem. So that's what we're doing now.
Yeah, and that's the thing about football. It breaks down barriers for sure, and I think it's a good move. It's a brave move to sort of to do that. It's obviously not easy, and I think it's a great opportunity. And I think that if all of us had that sort of mindset, we can help people. And I think that certainly one thing that strikes me is the players, from what I've seen, are so appreciative that they're getting some help and support, and it's not easy. And sometimes I put it into perspective, football, Tony, because sometimes I feel, in my opinion, sometimes, some of the young players, they don't I'm not having a go at them, there's some good young people out there, but I think they don't appreciate what they have, and I always remind the players, certainly when I work with them, I tell you, you got to appreciate what you have. There's people out there that would do anything to have what you've got. You've got food and shelter and opportunities to do stuff and to educate yourself, and they don't see it sometimes, Tony. They don't see the chances they've got, and like you says, I mean, some of the players in certain countries in the world, they're hungry, they've got the desire, and just a pair of football boots is a huge thing that they're grateful for. And I think sometimes a reminder for certain players who've got everything and the parents do everything for them to see, look, you know, there's a world outside there that we don't know about, and that awareness is good. So they see that and it grounds them, you know. It's a big thing. Big thing. And just out of interest, sort of from your perspective, you know, you've seen obviously Man City develop over the years and everything that goes with it. You know, recently, as you're probably well aware, there's been changes at United, management changes. And what your thoughts, Tony, in how a coach goes and then all of a sudden new coach comes in and a team completely transforms itself? And how does that happen? Listeners are probably wondering, how does that happen in terms of you've got a coach, and I'm speaking about United now, and I'm a big fan of Mourinho. I think he's the most successful manager in the modern day game. There's no taking that away from him. He's going to be successful wherever he goes. But the point being is that a new manager comes in and it's transformation, literally. How does that happen for listeners wondering what goes on?
Look, there's a number of things why it happens. But I think that the problem with him was he was bagging the players on to the media.
Yeah.
And obviously he was bagging the players to the fans, and obviously the players didn't like it, and obviously the players weren't playing for him at the end of the day. But like for him as a coach, he's got to bloody blame himself at the end of the day. He can't go blaming the players. He signed them.
Exactly.
Like he signed those players, and he's there blaming them on national TV. It's something you never do. As a coach, you've got to protect your players.
Yeah.
No matter what they're saying, especially in front of the media, you got to protect your players and obviously show them a bit of respect. But look, the coach come in. Solskjaer is was a really good striker back in his day. Obviously, you know him pretty well. He's come in, mate, and gained the respect of the players. At the end of the day, Mourinho lost the dressing room, and maybe his old ways don't work all the time, mate.
That's
players.
a great.
I mean, there's players that have different personalities.
That's a fascinating point. That's a fascinating point you made there. So, I think it's a really fascinating point about the old ways, and I think that as a coach you've got to keep evolving. And I think personally that with Mourinho it just wasn't the right club at the right time. I think that, like he says, I mean, some of the brand of football he has played, and it's a tough one. It's a hard one. He'll be successful if he goes, I'm sure of it. But like he says, I think that as a coach, you've got to keep updating yourself. And I think that one thing that I think that, you know, coaches who sort of stay in the game do really, really well is they keep updating themselves. And how important do you think it is, Tony, for a coach to keep evolving?
Mate, it's very important because, as you know, there's always players coming through the team and they're younger players. And if you're bloody old school, these guys aren't going to understand what you're doing, what you're saying. So you have to obviously evolve your coaching and refresh your coaching and obviously, you know, talk to younger players because obviously they're different. Everyone's different, you know what I mean? And you got to obviously learn different things because what happens, people find you out after a while. They find out what you're doing, and obviously now with internet and videos and all the tactical analysis and that, they're going to find exactly what you're doing and then how you're going. And obviously as a person, you know, you got to have that. You know, you got to be able to talk to your players, man. Like there's a lot of like now I see a lot of older coaches out there coaching. Yeah. You know, they're good. They're very tactical and very smart. But obviously that's not enough.
No,
you need to be able to talk to your players and to be able to give them reasons why they're not playing. Yeah. You can't be old school all the time. You know, you got to have. Sometimes you got to give a player a hug.
Exactly.
You know? And it's players are different. You need to be able to. Obviously, your coaching, you got to refresh. It's not just coaching. There's more to coaching than just coaching. It's the way you are. It's the way you talk. It's the way you conduct yourself around the players. You know what I mean?
That's a great point.
You got to drop to their level.
That's a good point. I think that one thing that strikes me of Pep Guardiola, he's that sort of, he's, you know, the Jurgen Klopp, and they're charismatic figures too, and you can sort of see that the players are playing for them. And I think Guardiola, definitely from what I can see from the outside looking in, he has that sort of respect of the players. That said, in saying that, that's said and done, he's had his critics too, and no doubt like the likes of Ibrahimovic. So you can't please every player, and that's the big thing in coaching, Tony. You can try and please everybody, you're not pleasing no one. Do you ever find that situation where, as a coach, it can be tough because you've got to make big decisions, and every player thinks they're the best player in the world, every parent thinks that their son or daughter is the best player in the world, and you've got to make these big decisions, And do you find that difficult sometimes? Because as a coach, you bond with a player, you become friends, and in my experience, Tony, when I work with players over the years, sometimes you have that paternal feeling for them. It's almost like your own son, because you've seen them for so many years working so hard, and then you've got to make a big decision. Actually, you know what? I can't offer you anything, and it's a big call. How do you feel about that? How do you get around that yourself?
Well, one thing I'll say is everyone hates successful people. That's one thing I'll tell you. Everyone will talk bad about someone that's good. People as haters out there. So
exactly.
It's the way football works, mate. People hate someone successful, and that was a downfall. That's one of the things why I left the club, because there were certain people in the club that were hating success, and they want to be the same. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you said, mate, everyone thinks they're good and everyone wants to play, but at the end of the day, there's only 11 positions available for the starting team, and then there's only 5 spots available, on the bench. At the end of the day, some players have to miss out.
Yeah.
But again, that's what I was saying to you, is communication wins at the end of the day. As a coach, you've got to communicate and tell them, listen, this is why you're not playing, because I feel that you're not going to fit in today's game, because this team's, we just give them a reason why he's not playing. But some coaches don't give reasons, and that's why players get upset.
Yeah.
In my tenure as a coach in the past 5 years, I've never had one person walk out on me. Even though they didn't play, they never walked out, which obviously shows that I was doing a good job and they loved the environment. But in saying, some parents think that their sons are better than what they are, but at the end of the day, they need to be realistic and look at it, because some kids get better at a later age. Some kids develop later. Some kids develop early. When they get older, they go backwards. It's just the way the game is at the end of the day. And parents need to just listen to their coach, because they're the professionals, and they need not to get involved, because that's another big problem that we have in football, is parents think they know everything, and it causes a lot of problems on the sidelines, and it causes a lot of problems with the coaching staff, and sometimes it causes they kill their kids' future and their career. Football is a very small world,
That's a great point. And I think, it's an interesting point you made. I think from a cultural point of view as well, Tony, I think that there's some similarities over here as well, where, the tall poppy syndrome, where, certainly, we've experienced in Australia where, and in the UK, it's quite similar in one respect, where sometimes they sort of build you up to sort of break you down. And I sort of think some certain cultures aren't that way. I mean, the way the Americans treat their sports people, some of the European countries treat their sports people, it's not the same way. We've sort of got this sort of culture sometimes where you get to the very top and all of a sudden they're just ready to sort of take you down for whatever reason. But you've got to ride above that. You've got to sort of rise above that and keep focused on the job in hand and not get caught up in all that. I think it's really important stuff. Important point you've made there, not get drawn in. And I've had people at times, they can be critical, but you've got to stay focused on where you're going, and that's the key. But it's been really fascinating having you on the show, Tony. It's flown through the hour. I know it's the all hours in the morning there. It's been fantastic. And I really want to thank you for coming on board the show, and hopefully have you back on again. And certainly when you visit in the UK again, it'd be great to have you in the studio again and sort of keep tabs of how you're getting on with different teams. The last tour you did was successful. It was a pleasure to work with the lads and meet some of the lads and watch the lads in action too. So I want to thank you, Tony, for coming on board the show. It's been absolutely fantastic, and hopefully we have you back on again at some point again. Thanks.
Absolute pleasure, mate. It's always good talking to you, mate. Awesome.
Thanks, Tony. All the best, mate. Thank you.
Thanks, mate. Champion.
And there we go. That was Tony Basha all the way from Australia. A hugely respected coach. You can Google Tony Basha. You'll see just how respected he is. Phenomenal coach. And he was over in Salford recently, or the UK in general.